Sequoyah. Sequoyah was born about 1770 in the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee. He was a Cherokee Indian. When he was small, his mother told him many traditional stories. Sequoyah loved to listen to them. In the 1700s, the Cherokee did not have a writing system. They told their stories from memory. As time passed, people showed less interest in storytelling. The stories were slowly disappearing. Sequoyah wanted to save this important tradition. He decided to create a writing system for the Cherokee language. Sequoyah started his work in 1814. He created a written symbol for every syllable in the Cherokee language. Finally, in 1821, Sequoyah was finished. He had created a total of 86 symbols. Some of the symbols looked like letters from the English alphabet. Other symbols were completely new. Sequoyah taught other members of his tribe how to read his symbols. In 1828, he started a newspaper called the Cherokee Phoenix. It was the first Native American newspaper in history. In 1838, the U.S. government forced the Cherokee to move to Oklahoma. Sequoyah died there 5 years later. At the time, he was trying to create a writing system for another Native American language.
Annie Dodge Wanika. Annie Dodge Wanika was born on a Navajo reservation in 1910. When she was just 8 years old, there was a flu epidemic at the reservation. Annie survived, but thousands of other children on the reservation died. This tragedy shaped the rest of Annie's life. Annie's father was chief of the Navajo. Annie learned about leadership from him. In 1951, she was elected to the Navajo Tribal Council. Her goal as a tribal leader was to improve health conditions on the reservation. Annie never wanted another tragedy like the one she experienced. In 1960, Annie started giving talks on the radio. She explained the importance of modern medicine. Many Navajos did not trust doctors and hospitals. Annie had to overcome their fear of white medicine. Annie understood that traditional ways of healing were also important. She worked with native Indian medicine men. They used herbs and ceremonies to heal the sick. Annie wanted to combine traditional forms of healing with modern medicine. Gradually, people accepted her ideas. Medicine men actually began to work with doctors. Health standards began to improve. The lifespan of Navajos also increased. For her efforts, Annie received the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 1963. She was the first Native American to receive this award. And in 2000, Annie was admitted into the National Women's Hall of Fame. Thomas Alva Edison. Thomas Edison was born in Ohio. As a young boy, he loved to read and learn. He was taught at home by his mother. He became very interested in electricity. In 1869, he decided to become a scientist and moved to New York City. In 1876, he started a research laboratory in Newark, New Jersey. He called it Menlo Park. The next year, Edison invented the phonograph. 2 years later, he invented the electric light bulb. Later, he experimented with motion pictures. He made The Great Train Robbery, the first movie that told a story. He never stopped working. In total, he created more than 1,100 inventions.
Dian Fossey. Dian Fossey was interested in animals all her life. She was especially interested in wild animals. In 1963, she went to East Africa to see mountain gorillas for herself. Dian immediately fell in love with these beautiful animals. In 1967, Dian moved to Rwanda to study the gorillas in their natural habitat. She learned that gorillas were being shot and killed by hunters. She became very concerned. The gorillas were in danger of extinction. One day, Dian's favorite gorilla, Digit, was killed. So Dian decided to do something. In 1983, she wrote a book called Gorillas in the Mist. She wanted the world to know that the gorillas were in danger. 5 years later, the book became a film. People around the world asked the government of Rwanda to do something. Today, the gorillas are protected thanks in part to Dian Fossey. Sadly, Dian was murdered in 1985.
Rachel Carson. Rachel Carson was born in a small town on the Allegheny River in Pennsylvania. As a young child, Rachel was interested in animals and nature. She also loved to write, and she decided to be a writer when she grew up. In college, Rachel combined her love of nature and her passion for writing. She studied both biology and English, graduating with high honors in 1929. After that, Rachel started working for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. She wrote radio plays to educate people about nature. In 1941, Rachel published her first book. It was called Under the Sea Wind, and it was about animals living in the Arctic zone. Rachel published her next book, The Sea Around Us, in 1950. It quickly became a bestseller. But Rachel's most famous book was Silent Spring, which was published in 1962. In Silent Spring, she told about the dangers of pesticides and other chemicals. It showed how pesticides traveled through the food chain, from plants to animals, and eventually human beings. Soon after that, many laws were passed by the government to control the use of pesticides. With Silent Spring, Rachel Carson had started the environmental movement.
George Washington Carver. George Washington Carver was born into slavery during the Civil War. Like many other slaves, he took the last name of his owner, Moses Carver. Mr. Carver was kind to George and treated him like a member of his own family. As a child, George was very curious and intelligent. He dreamed of going to school. At the time, however, African Americans weren't allowed to attend the local school. Mr. Carver helped him get into a different school in another town 8 miles away. George was a good student, but he didn't start college until 1891, when he was about 30 years old. After graduation, George started teaching science classes. He was the first black professor at Iowa State College, and he quickly gained a reputation as an outstanding scientist. In 1896, George was invited to teach at the Tuskegee Institute, an all-black college in Alabama. George accepted because he had always wanted to help other African Americans get an education. In the South, cotton was an important crop. Some farmers planted only cotton. George discovered that it was important to change crops. He told farmers to alternate sweet potatoes and peanuts with cotton. By doing that, the soil kept its nutrients. In his laboratory, George also found other uses for peanuts. He developed over 300 products from the peanut plant. By the time he died in 1943, he was recognized as the world's greatest plant scientist. Father Flanagan. Edward Joseph Flanagan was born in Ireland in 1886. He studied in Ireland, Rome, and Austria. In 1912, he became a priest. People call priests Father. Father Flanagan came to the U.S. in 1914 and settled in Nebraska. There, he created a shelter for homeless men. Then, in 1917, Father Flanagan started a shelter for homeless boys. Father Flanagan taught these boys the importance of good behavior. They helped run the farm. In 1926, they changed the name of the farm to Boys Town. Father Flanagan died in 1948. But his work has continued. In 1978, girls were admitted to Boys Town. Other shelters for homeless children and teens have started all over the country.
Jane Addams. Jane Addams was born in Illinois in 1860. Her father was a senator, and Jane lived in a very nice house. But she cared about people who were less fortunate. In nearby Chicago, Jane saw many people living in poverty. She decided to do something about it. In 1882, she created a settlement. It was a shelter for the poor, especially for poor women. Jane called it Hull House. Many immigrants came to Hull House, and they brought their children. Jane taught the children English, music, and art. Their parents took classes in job training. More and more people came. Jane decided to start other settlements like Hull House. In 1911, Jane started the National Federation of Settlements. The Federation organized settlements all over the country. Jane had started an important social movement. She was famous, but she stayed at Hull House all her life. In 1931, she won the Nobel Peace Prize.
Booker T. Washington. Booker T. Washington was born into slavery in 1856. 7 years later, all slaves were freed. Booker decided to go to school, but he also had to work. He got a job in a salt mine, digging salt underground. He worked from 4 a.m. until 9 a.m., and then he went to school until 3 p.m. After school, he went back to work for 2 more hours. In 1872, Booker went to the Hampton Institute, a school for African Americans. He graduated 3 years later and became a teacher. Booker bought an old farm in 1881. He turned the buildings into classrooms. The school was called the Tuskegee Institute, and it offered courses to African Americans. Booker believed that education should be combined with job training. To help his students get jobs and start their own businesses, he created the National Negro Business League in 1901. A year later, he wrote a book explaining his ideas. It was called Up from Slavery. Booker died at his home in Tuskegee, Alabama, in 1915. The Tuskegee Institute still offers courses in arts and sciences, agriculture, business, and education.
Nellie Bly. Elizabeth Cochran was born on May 5, 1864, in Pennsylvania. Her father was a judge. When he died, the family had to sell their comfortable home. Elizabeth helped to raise her siblings. Then her mother remarried, and her stepfather was abusive to the children. Perhaps that led to Elizabeth's work for women's rights. At the age of 18, Elizabeth wrote a letter to the editor of the Pittsburgh Dispatch in response to a sexist editorial. She was hired by the paper as a journalist and changed her name to Nellie Bly. Her first article, in 1885, was called The Girl Puzzle. It was about prejudice against women in the workplace. Nellie is often considered the inventor of investigative reporting. She wrote about sweatshop workers. She wrote about poverty and corruption in Mexico. After returning from Mexico, she got a job with the New York World. In 1887, she pretended to be a mental patient. She checked into a mental hospital and then wrote an article called 10 Days in a Madhouse. In 1889, she became famous when the New York World sent her to write about a journey around the world. She challenged the novel Around the World in 80 Days and completed her trip in just over 72 days. She got a huge welcome when she returned. In 1914, she was in Europe when World War I began, and she stayed to report on the war from the front lines. Back in New York, Nellie continued to write about the poor, the sick, and the underprivileged until her death in 1922.